Alrighty, welcome back everybody. Tonight we are going to talk about sight in wine sensory color evaluation. Sight is extremely important because, not only does it tell us a little bit about the wine, it's our first impression, but also it can give us clues about the characteristics that it's going to have, the health of the wine, does it look good? We rely on sight for a lot of things, just in consumption, does a food look spoiled? Is it off colored? Does it look not very savory? Is a fruit ripe? These are all things that we talk about tonight when we talk about sight in food and wine evaluation. So let's dive into it. First of all, how do we see? I'm not going to dive too deep into the complexities of this, but overall, there's your brain and your eyeball, and they're connected through an optic nerve. And you need an object to be looking at and a light source, essentially. So the light source, you can be looking at the light directly and you can see the light source, but what you see around you is reflections of light, basically. Like my mouse does not emit light. What you see is the light reflecting off of the mouse. It gives you an object and gives you a shape that you recognize, that you've seen before in your brain. Like, this is a mouse because you grew up knowing this is a mouse. So that's ultimately how we see things. There's a lot of neuroscience connected to how we perceive things and illusions and all this wonderful stuff. If you're curious about that, definitely click on this link that I provided here. It's a very interesting article. Actually, here, let's just open it up. Why not? Why not? And it's huge. I know, it's 100%. Okay, cool. So this talks about reality and how what we see versus what our brain tells us is happening is really biased and can happen from what you think you want to see sometimes. So how all of our realities are different based off of how we interpret data. So there's a lot of really interesting clips here to kind of show you illusion and to kind of tell you about what is going on, and why you thought you saw what you saw, and versus what is actually really happening, and how there's like a lag in our brains, from what is actually happening in an instant. So there's a time to process what we're seeing. Anyways, super interesting. It was a wonderful read. Not much incredibly to do with wine, but very interesting when we talk about sight and how we perceive things. So definitely recommend. So ultimately, yes, we have a source that's being hit with light. You're seeing all the reflections that passes through your eye and into the retina, which is a layer of tissue that is very light sensitive along the back of your eyeball. Here is the retina. There are special cells called photoreceptors on the retina that turn that light into electrical signals that get sent to the brain, essentially. So what are these photoreceptors? Well, they're rods and cones, essentially. Rods are responsible for the vision of low light levels and peripheral vision, so being able to kind of like see in darker environments. Those are the rods. Cones are responsible for detecting color and color vision, and they're much more active at higher light levels. So like being outside, say it's like high noon and you're on a hike and there's all these bright flowers, bright colors, lots of light coming in, versus that walk back to the car and it's late at night. It's much darker. So it's kind of a really basic general overview on sight. But there's a lot of variation in sight and also our perception, as we, kind of brushed on a little bit earlier. What you see might not be what someone else sees, and what your definition of a color might not be someone else's definition. Like, for example, you could go out shopping with a significant other or a friend, and the difference between burgundy and maroon. It causes a lot of debate, a lot of spark. You're like, well, this is burgundy. Well, this is maroon. Well, no, this one's more purple, so this is obviously maroon. No, this is burgundy. So it's interesting to see all the different adaptations and interpretations of colors. But overall, it's extremely important for wine. So getting into now what we're probably most interested in tonight, how does this all relate to wine? Well, sight is our very first impression. Wine is not very aromatic. It does not fill the room when you open a bottle. It's not like cooking something or walking into a restaurant or walking into a fish market when you can smell right away what's going on, and that's your first impression. For wine, it's mostly sight, whether it's the label that you're seeing or the glass being poured right in front of you. So the color of the wine will give you, certain impressions about the style of the wine. Is it very obviously, is it a red wine? Is it a white wine? Is it a rosé? And then what you would expect with that. And then even more into that, is it a really dark red wine? Is it really inky? Is it really light? Is it kind of brown? For a white wine, is it kind of brown also? Is it sparkling? Is it effervescent? Is it very yellow? Does it look like water? Is it very clear? Is it going to be very light? Not a lot of flavors maybe in that. So lots of assumptions made right off the bat before you even smell the wine. So that's very, very important. The color also is a really big indicator of health. If it's a really vibrant, nice, really pure color, it can really is a telltale sign that this is a healthy wine. If it's kind of blurry or kind of brown, sometimes those are key signs of unhealthy wine or wine that's starting to spoil. So that's very, very important indicator. The general flavors that are in the wine, we kind of touched on that. Reds will have more red wine flavors and whites will have more white wine flavors, but we have a whole slide on this. Aging, changes wine color. We talked a little bit about that before, where it starts more as a purpley color, then it evolves to more red, and then eventually brown through that. Acidity affects the color, so the more acidic a wine is, the more vibrant in color it is, the more basic it is, the more dull it is, and also the freshness as well, and that's kind of tied to acidity and pH, and also SO2 levels, which we'll brush on that as well tonight. So yeah, that's kind of an overall of what we're going to talk about. So yes, like I kind of spoiled this slide, but yes, wine is not very aromatic, So our first impression is sight. It's extremely important. Like you can tell from this picture on the left compared to the right. This one on the left, like maybe, I don't know, maybe this is an under-extracted Grenache. Who knows? Maybe it's a Pinot Noir. I don't know. Maybe this is a very dark rosé. Judging from this bottle, maybe not. It's not a typical bottle for a rosé, but who knows? My assumption when I see this is that the wine's not going to necessarily have a lot of body. It's going to be a lot of lighter in like flavors and structure, maybe more of just like the red fruit flavors. Whereas when I see this, this could be a lot of things, obviously. This is probably going to have more body compared to that. More of the dark fruit flavors, maybe some of like leather, tannin, maybe more oak. So that's kind of what we see there. As a judge, if these were the same varieties, like if, say, I'm judging Tempranillo and I saw this, it would automatically get a bad score. We'd still give it a shot, we'd still smell it and taste it, but that's one of the first things we look at is like, hey, your extraction was not very good. This is not typical of a Tempranillo. Unless it somehow magically blows your socks off when you taste it, it could get a good score, but oftentimes we try to look at, are you representing the variety well? So take that into account. But if it's a variety that is very light and is supposed to look like that, then that's something else entirely. So that's how you need to know what you're working with and know the varieties individually. So those are kind of the assumptions that we start to make. Okay, why is color so important? Well, color has a lot to do with how we perceive things. Of course, I know I'm kind of repeating myself on this. We really depend on color to determine if foods and drinks are spoiled, if fruits are ripe enough, or if they're even clean for consumption. I don't know if you remember in the 90s, there was a really big rage, or early 2000s, I always group those two together in my head, when green and purple ketchup was a thing. And there's a reason that didn't last long, and that's not around today. It's because it does not look very appetizing. It does not look really very normal for, something to drizzle on your french fries or your hot dog or something like that. There's a lot of research that goes into food science, but also like advertising, very specific colors that your mind reacts to make you feel positive, to make the company look clean and professional and organized. Ketchup, for example, if you want to get back on that, naturally, cooked tomatoes that have spices, and homemade ketchup does not necessarily have this beautiful bright red color. But this bright red color in our minds gives us the impression that this is very fresh and it's very tasty. Look, it looks very favorable to eat. It looks very good. So that's why that ketchup is specifically that bright, rich color, because it looks the best to eat. It's the most appetizing, I guess is the word I'm trying to say. It's the most appetizing color. And then also, obviously for fruit, if you saw a watermelon that looked like this, you wouldn't be super stoked biting into that. So, a lot goes into it. A lot goes into it, that's for sure. Okay. In general, lighter wines will be lighter colored wines will be lighter in body, and also darker colored wines will be a little bit heavier. So you can kind of see this boldness chart that I stole from Wine Folly. So you can see how some of these lighter reds, like Pinot Noir, Gamay, I don't know how to pronounce this top one, Schiava, those are much lighter. That has to do with the actual morphology of the grapes, of the skins of the grapes. Sometimes they're really thin, sometimes they're just really lighter in color in general, or just the regions that they're grown in. It's very typical for that variety, and that's okay. That's typical for those variety, but there are typical flavors and aromas associated with lighter wines compared to the bottom of the spectrum, which bolder, darker wines. So you can kind of see the beautiful spectrum, what we got going on here, and just see how different it is. So in general, lighter wines, lighter bodied. Medium color, medium body, darker color, full bodied. And this also follows trends with wine pairing as well. So a lot of people will tell you, well, the color of the meat is very close to what you should be pairing, wine you should be pairing with it. So like a white wine should be paired with chicken, or lean cuts of pork, like pork tenderloin. Sometimes you could pair a white wine with that. Lighter reds could go with salmon, even though that is a fish. It has a pinkish color, so it might be able to pair well with some of these lighter reds up here. And then as you get darker, you get Zinfandel, which a lot of people pair with like ribs or burger. Then you have Petit Syrah, Petit Verdot, Cabernet Sauvignon, which a lot of people will pair with a nice juicy fat steak. So you can kind of see the trend in that. There's lots of exceptions. There's lots of room for creativity in there, of course, but that's kind of, when you start food pairing, that's kind of the most basic thing people start telling you, is to pair the wine, the color of the wine, with the food. And that has to do with the body and the fats that are present, and the acids, how they interact with fats. But we'll talk more about that when we get into our wine pairing section, which will be very exciting. But kind of a note for you to keep for when we get there. Okay, so flavors that are associated with the lighter red wines would be more of red fruits. So like strawberry, raspberry, cherry, of course. Darker red wines would have more of dark fruits. So blackberry, boysenberry, blueberry, etc. And this is very, very general. So, as you can see, there's lots on the spectrum here. And depending on the climate, and depending on the yeast they use, and all the infinite choices that could have happened between the processing and aging and the storage, it all changes and develops, of course. Let's keep that in mind. It's very generalized. Lighter white wines will typically, lighter in color, will typically have more of the citrus, floral, crisp, maybe even grapefruit component to it. Deeper yellow wines that have that color typically will have more of the butter component, cream, stone fruit, and some tropical fruits, because that deeper yellow is associated with oxidation. Not necessarily extreme oxidation, that's bad for the wine, but the slow ingress of oxidation through the barrel that develops that color, but also those are the flavors that happen during that come about during that process as well. So that's why you see that trend. Oh, allergies are crazy today, sorry. Okay. Colors of red wine. This is a very small segment of a very large poster. This is not it. This is just an example for you guys of some of the variation that we have. But say for like that, we know that there's different colors that are typical. There's like a range for typical varieties. But say like you take a Tempranillo, like we said in my example up here. So like if these were both Tempranillos, so what would cause a wine, what would cause a wine to have a different color than it would on average? And those reasons can happen from extraction, whether we didn't get enough extraction through the fermentation process, there weren't enough, pump overs or punch downs or any of that, or if it was a cold fermentation. Oxidation would be a reason that starts to turn brown, starts more of a brown color. Aging, this is not necessarily a negative thing. Aging would change because, as we talked about, a younger wine will be more of a purple hue to it, but over time it starts to turn more red. So that's a reason for color change. Spoilage, that is definitely a negative, will cause some turbidity and haziness in the wine, and then the climate will change as well. So cooler climate wines versus hotter climate wines, I've actually heard it both ways, and I couldn't tell you which one's right because I don't trust either one. So I've heard from some people and some very credible sources on both sides of this that cool climate will have more intense colors because the cold weather creates for thicker skins, and I've heard from hot climate because of the hot weather and the extreme ripening that it causes for more intense color. So I honestly could not tell you which one. I know for sure that it definitely impacts the flavors that are associated in the acid levels and the sugar levels. Absolutely, I could talk about that all day. But as far as color extraction, I think there's too many factors going into it. I mean, people use enzymes. People, use different methods for extracting color from skins now. It's not extremely straightforward. So I would just say you can research it yourself and form your own opinion, or you can just be open-minded and, don't be the person. Don't be the know-it-all that's sparking debate between other people. That's all I can say. Okay, so colors of white wines. So there are some white wines that are also associated with the colors are associated with specific varieties. So typically very clear, or let's say platinum colored white wines would be like Sauvignon Blanc, Gruner Veltliner, I think I'm saying that correctly. Maybe some other ones. Yellow would be, Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigio, Riesling, and then more of the gold color is typical of like an oaked Chardonnay or a Viognier. That's for sure. So there's a lot more than just that. That's just an example to show you. Rosé, lots of different beautiful shades of rosé. Pinot Noir, Merlot, Grenache, Malbec. We have a nice little lineup here. Depends mostly on the variety, of course, but it also depends on the time of skin contact. There's a lot of variability for skin contact for rosé. Some people do it for a couple hours. Some people do it for a couple days. So depending on how long you have the juice in contact with the skins is going to determine how much color you extracted. So, like we said, more time on the skins would create a more intense color, more saturation, and more color in general for a rosé would also mean more body as well, because a lot of the components that you're getting from body are coming from the skin. So the tannins, the polyphenolics, those are the color compounds. Those are coming from the skin that contributes to body and mouthfeel. So that's the connection there, in case you were curious. So yeah, like I said, we barely scratched the surface. Here are some more variations of yellow. There's a color chart I have here for you guys in the link. So these are some of the descriptive words for a wine color. So first of all, the color is categorized off of its intensity. So there's pale, medium, or deep. So say we take straw here, which is a color description for a white wine. So for straw, you could have pale straw, medium straw, or deep straw. And that's actually the first three colors right here. So pale, medium, deep. So it's all the same hue. It's all the same color, just different saturation. So pale, medium, or deep. Same for copper, same for purple, pale purple, medium purple, or deep purple. Those are kind of the comparisons there. So for white wines, typical descriptors are straw, yellow, gold, brown, and amber. That's getting from the clearest to the most intense color, and amber is kind of like oxidized, more of a brown undertone. Rosé, we have copper to salmon to pink. So copper being the lightest shade of pink, salmon being more of the intermediate, and pink itself just being the most intense color. And then for reds, we start with ruby, then purple, then garnet, and then tawny. And tawny, of course, is more of that brown undertone as well. So, excuse me. So, yes. I'm not really sure how ruby becomes before purple, but that is how it's displayed on the chart. And I guess maybe ruby is more vibrant than just purple, so maybe that would be the youngest of the mix. I'm not really sure. Excuse me. Ooh. Okay. I've been working in the yard, and I think I have a lot of dust in my throat, so I apologize. Okay. So our language reflects our limitations for color description. So as you can see, there's only 4, 5, I can count, different colors for white wines up here. 5 different words to describe it. But there is obviously a lot more. If you go to Home Depot, or if you just go to any color chart and you see all the different names they have for all the different colors, we have way more than just that for white wine, reds, and rosés. So you think about when you are talking about wine, there is a standard that people would understand. Like, people would understand in the community, would understand these words and exactly what color you're talking about. But this doesn't always do it justice. Sometimes there's more than that. So, for example, Inuit people have over 40 words to describe snow. So for someone who comes from the valley, or someone who comes from the desert, that's remarkable, because snow is just snow. But this really defines their ability to discriminate all the different forms of snow. Is it hail? Is it sleet? Is it, semi-frozen? Is it, I don't know. Because I just don't know. But there's 40 different words to describe snow in that culture. So you think about how many descriptors can you think to describe the different shades of red in a wine, or a white, or a rosé, So in our language, in English, we have 40 different words to describe just the color red. We have 24 different shades of pink. And we have over 140 different shades of yellow. And those numbers aren't what's accepted in the wine community or in the Guild of Psalms or anything. I was just curious what we had in our language for these things. So when you think about, those colors, think about all the different shades of those color, all the different types of colors and undertones. So that brings me to a kind of side topic I was reading. If you were trying to determine undertones in wines, like a red wine, if you have a really hard time being like, ooh, that has a blue undertone, or that has a purple undertone, or this has a yellowish, brownish undertone, a really good experiment you can do is you can take a glass of water and some food coloring, and you can basically add enough drops of red to where it looks kind of like a red wine, and then you have a control, and then maybe you have a couple other that look just like it, and you can add just a couple drops of blue into one, and maybe a couple drops of yellow into one, just very slightly, so you can just barely see the difference, and you can kind of train your eyes to understand what that wine would look like with those undertones. So that's just kind of it's a fun fact if you wanted to do that. Okay, so moving on into health. So health is determined by color. Why do we care about this? Because no one wants to really drink spoiled wine. And if you're going to evaluate a wine, you want to make sure it's healthy. You know, if the vibrancy of color and the clarity are extremely important in determining if it's healthy or if this is something that you're going to want to drink. And there is a trend going right now towards unfiltered wine, and that would not be clear, and it might be vibrant in some cases, but maybe not because it has suspended particles in it. So suspended particles make it look a little duller, just in general. So some people are drinking unfiltered wine, but as a whole in the industry, that's not necessarily the standard right now. So there is an exception there. So keep that in mind. So clarity is described as brilliant, clear, dull, or hazy. There's a couple different descriptors for that in like a wine tasting notes and judging. pH. So in general, the lower the pH, the more acidity there is in wines. Remember, like 7 is neutral, 3 is acidic, and 10 is very basic. The higher you go, the less acid, the more base you have. So anyways, lower pH, higher acidity. It keeps spoilage microorganisms far away from the wine, really discourages the formation and development of them in the wine. We don't want these because they can create really bad flavors and aromas and cloudiness in the wine. So that's part of it. SO2 levels, in combination with the pH, the SO2, if as long as it's in a high enough range for that pH, helps to preserve the wine color and flavors to keep it healthy and optimal for drinking. So those are all very related. So that's one of the things that we talk about with vision. Okay, so say you decide you want to become a wine judge, or you want to set up a panel somewhere, or even better, you work in a winery and you want to have a contest to see, which color is best, I guess, for your wines. So there's actually a specific background that is ideal for evaluating wine color. And it's not stark white, and it's not black. A lot of people will use like a white paper to input it behind their glass, and that's kind of an okay fix. But according to a lot of other standards around the world, what they actually use for their booths when people do tasting and wine evaluation is a shade of N7 or N8. So it's actually a shade of gray. And it's a more of a lighter gray, but that is so you don't over light the wine, if that makes sense. You're not adding too much light, because it can actually kind of strip some of the color away. If it's too bright, it can be too much. So that's extremely important for evaluation. So keep that in mind. Like if you go to a tasting room and like the walls are yellow, or the counter is yellow, or the counter is red, it's not. I mean, enjoy what you enjoy, obviously, but if you're thinking of from a wine sensory perspective, if you want to create like a really professional environment, you should go for a shade of gray for evaluation. Okay, perfect lighting. So now that we have the background, or the color involved in the winemaking, there's actually a difference in the light source that you use as well. So different light sources will make the color look different. Obviously, a lot of people say that daylight is good, but daylight is actually variable. Depends on what part of the what side of the hemisphere, which hemisphere you're on. Excuse me. Or if you're by the equator, or if it's a semi-cloudy day. Is it high noon? Is it morning? Is it 3 o'clock? I don't know. It can be really variable throughout the day. And here's a really good picture to kind of show that. Nighttime and at noon versus fluorescent versus sunset. You got 4 different shades of red here. So when you think about how that could make a wine look very different, fluorescent does not look very good. Noon looks nice. That looks pretty vibrant. Sunset looks all right. Looks kind of orange-ish, orangish red. And then nighttime just looks really dull. So you have to think about the light source you're using and whether it's really doing the wine justice. So best light sources. There are a couple different standards for wine evaluation across the world. And that's figure 5 right here. So what you see right here is the light spectrum. So start at 400 nanometers going to 700. This is the, kind of the Roy G. Biv section of the light spectrum. So we have the relative energy of the light shown here. And then we have a couple different curves. So the solid line is CIE source C. We have Macbeth 7500 Kelvin daylight, and then xenon arc. So it shows you that throughout these choices, throughout any of these three curves, that it's pretty complete. It covers. They stay at a pretty constant relative energy. They're relatively close to each other. So that is what would provide the best light source for evaluating wine, because, say you have a peak, a really intense peak in the blue section, that's going to interfere with how you perceive red or how you perceive a white wine. If you have a really intense peak in the yellow, it's going to be the same thing. You don't want that interfering with your sight. You want it to be as well-rounded as possible, so that way it's even and you can perceive the truest color possible. So this is natural daylight, curve A. It's not horrible. You can see it's really blue and purple biased. But if you have what you have, then if that's what you have, then that works. Macbeth filtered is not necessarily fantastic. There's a huge gap here in the red section, and another bias towards blue and purple. But any of these, honestly, you can get away with. What you really want to avoid is this, which have very sharp peaks of energy. Red is going to have an issue. You're going to have an issue evaluating red wine if you're seeing mostly red peaks. Curve C, this is a fluorescent light, the average daylight fluorescent you can purchase. These peaks would give you a run for your money, so that's not ideal. And this Macbeth Examelite is also not ideal. So if you're thinking about setting up a booth or, considering evaluation on a professional level, now you know. So moving on, color has 3 different definitions. Okay, and we talk about this, it's extremely important. So hue is the immediate discernible color. So, whether it's mandarin orange, is like this, say it's the specific color of the name, or aquamarine or navy blue, whatever, that is a hue. That is the immediate discernible color. Chroma is the strength or weakness of a color, sometimes called intensity or saturation. So you can see in this color palette how hue is this outer circle. So say these are all the colors that we have. Then chroma is the intensity. So as you get out towards the border, the color becomes more intense. It's the same color, it just becomes more saturated, much more intense. Value is the lightness or darkness of a color. So this is shaped like a cone because as the farther you go down, everyone groups to black. So this is like if you're a painter, imagine you have yellow and you can it's one color and you can either add white paint to it and lighten it, or you can add black to it and darken it. So that's value, the change in value right there. It's the same hue, different value. Okay. Another note, hue contains red, yellow, green, and blue, and all the intermediate colors between those on the spectrum. But black, white, and neutral grays have no hue. Those are shades. Those are not considered colors. Those are shades. So just for your technical definition pleasure there. So how important is sight? It's so important that's 20% of the total score of the modified UC Davis scoring system, which is a 20 points max. So sight, for grading for sight alone, it's maximum up to 4 points. So if you don't score well on sight, you don't get a gold medal. You can have an amazing aroma and bouquet, mouthfeel, flavor, overall. If you don't have a good color for that wine, you're not getting a gold medal. So it's kind of interesting to see this, though, because you can see what's favored in a wine competition, and that's the aroma and bouquet. and the in-mouth flavors. So smell and taste are definitely very favored, which is interesting. But yeah, now you know. So for this scoring system, it says maximum of 4 points, so up to 4 points. So that means you could score like 3.5, 2.5, whatever, 2.2. So this is the breakdown of that scoring system. So a gold medal would be anywhere between 18.5 to 20 points. A silver would be anywhere between 17 and 18.4. And a bronze would be anywhere between 15.5 to 16.9. If you score below a bronze, you do not medal. So that is how that goes. And, oh man, I guess that's it. Oh, I was just ready to talk all day. Yeah, so that is sight. I hope that was helpful. I hope you learned something new today. Next time you go for a drive, or, you go shopping and see a shirt that has a nice color, try to take a look and learn the color and diversify, your vocabulary on that, and see if you can apply it to wine, or maybe you'll buy yourself the chart. I don't know, and learn new colors. But yeah, that's what we have for sight. Next section is going to be taste, which is very exciting. Or smell. No, it's smell. Sorry. And so we'll continue on to this whole theme of wine sensory. And then after that, I believe we're going to jump into wine pairing. So it's very exciting. As always, if you have questions, concerns, or comments, please feel free to reach out to me, email me. You can send me a message through Canvas, no problem. Hope you all are staying safe and sane. Good luck with your exams. Please don't forget about that. And look forward to seeing you guys next time. All right, we'll see ya.